Clara Montgomery sat in the plush office of Marcus Wilder, the man who ran the luxury distribution empire. Her fingers drummed nervously against the wooden desk, the sound echoing in the sterile silence. For the past 2 years, she had seamlessly navigated the high-stakes world of corporate power and secret dealings, managing Marcus's schedule and tending to his needs. She had learned to master the art of handling his demanding clients, often rubbing elbows with people from both the glittering heights of business and the murky depths of the underground world. But despite the success and the polished exterior, Clara knew there was much more to Marcus and his empire than met the eye. Marcus was a man with an impeccable reputation, one that had been carefully cultivated over the years. A charismatic leader, he had the charm to win over anyone, but Clara knew better. Behind the polished suit and silver tongue was a man whose business dealings were far from legitimate. His network extended far beyond the bounds of legality, and while he made billions selling luxury goods, his other ventures, smuggling, extortion, and other illicit activities, were the true backbone of his wealth. Clara had long been aware of this dark side of Marcus's life, but she chose to keep her distance, compartmentalizing her role as his assistant and nothing more. She had a job to do, and she was good at it. But today, everything was about to change. Clara's phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was a call from her sister, Sophia. Her stomach clenched as she answered. "Sophia? What's wrong?" Clara asked, her voice tight with concern. "Sis, I was attacked." Sophia's voice trembled on the other end. "2 men, they tried to steal my laptop and phone." Clara's heart sank. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm at the hospital. They said I need surgery. My ribs, they're worried about my lungs. The operation costs $15,000, but the insurance won't cover it. I don't know what to do." Clara felt the weight of the world descend upon her. Her sister was in pain, her life hanging by a thread, and there was no way she could afford the surgery on her own. Her salary, though decent, was barely enough to cover her own expenses, let alone the mounting costs of Sophia's medical bills. She had to act fast. She knew there was only one person who could help, but asking for help from him meant stepping into a dangerous game. She knew Marcus's world too well. It was a world of power, money, and moral compromises. But in that moment, Clara saw no other option. If she didn't act now, Sophia might not survive. Clara made the decision. She would go to Marcus. Clara arrived at Marcus's office, her mind racing. As she stood in front of his desk, she tried to calm her nerves. Marcus looked up from his work, his piercing gaze meeting hers with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. "What is it, Clara?" he asked, his voice as smooth as always. Clara hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Marcus, I need your help. It's Sophia. She's been attacked, and she needs surgery. The insurance won't cover it, and I don't know where to turn." For a moment, there was silence. Clara could see Marcus processing the information, his face unreadable. He stood up, walking around his desk and pausing in front of her. "How much do you need?" he asked bluntly. Clara's heart raced. $15,000, she whispered. Marcus nodded slowly, then looked at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I'll pay for the surgery. But you'll have to do something for me in return." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all too real. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's gaze softened, just for a moment. "I need you to get more involved, Clara. More than just handling my schedule. I need you in my world, in my business. If you want your sister to get better, that's the price." Clara swallowed hard, her mind racing. This was the moment she had dreaded. She had always kept her distance from Marcus's darker side, but now, there was no way around it. For Sophia's sake, she had to say yes. "Okay," she said, the words feeling like they weighed a ton. "I'll do whatever it takes." Marcus's lips curled into a smile. "Good. This is just the beginning, Clara. You'll learn a lot more about me than you ever wanted to know." And with that, Clara's life took a sharp turn into the world she had tried so hard to avoid. The days that followed were a blur for Clara. She had never imagined that her life would take such a dark turn. Marcus, who had once seemed like a distant, albeit powerful boss, was now drawing her deeper into his dangerous world. The surgery for Sophia was scheduled, and Clara felt a small sense of relief, but she knew the cost of her decision would be far greater than the money Marcus had promised. As Clara began to spend more time with Marcus, she saw the true nature of his empire. It wasn't just about luxury goods, it was a complex web of illegal operations, each more dangerous than the last. Clara was initially tasked with overseeing business deals, but soon, her role began to evolve. Marcus, ever the strategist, started to involve her in discussions with his associates, men and women who were not only rich and powerful but ruthless in their pursuit of wealth. One afternoon, Marcus took Clara to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a sprawling complex, filled with crates marked with symbols she didn't recognize. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice barely masking the anxiety that crept in. Marcus turned to her with a look of amusement. "This, Clara, is the backbone of my business," he said. "Smuggled goods, rare artifacts, things the world doesn't even know exist. You're going to learn how to handle these." Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had heard rumors of Marcus's involvement in smuggling, but seeing it with her own eyes was something else entirely. The warehouse was full of danger, from the illegal items stored there to the hardened men guarding them. She realized, then, that there was no turning back. She had crossed a line, and now she was fully entrenched in Marcus's world. That evening, as they left the warehouse, Marcus turned to her. "You're learning fast," he said. "But there's more to this life than just business. You've seen how ruthless some of these people can be. You'll need to be just as tough if you want to survive." Clara nodded, trying to hide the fear that bubbled up inside her. She had always been strong, but this was a different kind of strength. A strength that came from navigating a world filled with betrayal, violence, and deception. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's involvement in Marcus's business grew. She started attending high-stakes meetings, negotiating with people whose faces were always hidden in the shadows. But through it all, Marcus remained a constant, a man who was both a mentor and a manipulator. Despite his cold exterior, Clara began to see glimpses of a softer side to him. There were moments when his guard dropped, particularly when he spoke about his past. He had come from nothing, a self-made man who had clawed his way to the top. He had no illusions about the sacrifices he had made along the way, and Clara could understand why he was so fiercely protective of his empire. But as she delved deeper into his world, Clara also began to see the cracks in Marcus's armor. There were times when the pressure of his double life seemed to get to him. He was always on edge, his eyes scanning every room as if he was waiting for someone to betray him. She couldn't help but wonder if his empire, built on lies and blood, was slowly unraveling. One night, Clara found herself at a lavish dinner party hosted by Marcus. The guests were a mixture of businessmen, politicians, and notorious figures, all gathered under the guise of celebrating a new deal. But Clara knew better. This was just another way for Marcus to cement his control over those who had the power to either make or break him. As the night went on, she overheard a conversation between Marcus and one of his associates, a man named Victor. "Ethan Grant is making a move," Marcus said, his voice low and tense. "He's been sniffing around, trying to take over some of our operations. We need to deal with him before he gets any closer." Clara's heart skipped a beat. Ethan Grant was a name she had heard whispered in the darker corners of the business world, a ruthless competitor who would stop at nothing to expand his empire. She knew that Marcus had built his wealth by being smarter and more ruthless than his rivals, but she had never seen him so on edge. Victor leaned in, his voice barely audible. "What do you want us to do?" Marcus's eyes gleamed with cold determination. "We take care of him. And I don't mean just business. If he crosses me again, we end it. Permanently." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that Marcus was involved in dangerous dealings, but hearing him speak so casually about murder shook her to the core. This wasn't just about business. This was about survival in a world where loyalty meant nothing, and power was the only thing that mattered. That night, Clara lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. She had crossed a line by asking Marcus for help, but now she was fully entangled in his world. There was no way out, not without risking everything she had worked for, including her sister's future. She had made her choice, but the deeper she went, the more she realized that the price of loyalty in Marcus's world was far higher than she had ever imagined. Clara couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped. Every day, her life became more enmeshed in Marcus's dangerous web, and despite the perks, like the new luxury apartment, the finer things in life, and the assurance that Sophia was recovering, there was always a price. The tension in the air was palpable. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and now she was fully involved in a world where power was the currency, and loyalty could be bought and sold. A few days after the conversation with Victor, Clara found herself at another one of Marcus's infamous meetings. This time, it was in a private lounge, hidden away from prying eyes. The faces in the room were all unfamiliar, a mix of shady businessmen and dangerous figures that Marcus often kept at arm's length. Clara was no longer just a passive observer, she was being brought into the fold. As much as she hated it, part of her found herself drawn to the power that surrounded her. Marcus was a force of nature, and in his presence, everything seemed possible. But that night, as the discussions turned to new territories and rivalries, Clara felt an unsettling shift in the room. She was sitting across from Marcus when a man named Leo, one of his most trusted men, leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. "Ethan Grant is making a play. He's closer than we thought, Marcus. His reach is spreading into our areas of influence. If we don't move soon, we'll lose everything." Marcus's expression hardened. He was calm on the outside, but Clara could see the storm brewing beneath his surface. Ethan Grant wasn't just a business rival, he was a direct threat to Marcus's empire, and that meant everything Marcus had built was at risk. Clara could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had always known that Marcus's world was dangerous, but now it was personal. She had seen the lengths he was willing to go to in order to protect his empire, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to follow him into the kind of darkness that awaited them. Later that night, as they returned to Marcus's penthouse, he finally spoke to Clara in private. "You're in deeper than you think now, Clara," he said, his voice low and serious. "There's no turning back from this. Ethan Grant doesn't play fair, and neither do I. If he threatens me, he'll regret it." Clara swallowed hard, trying to process the magnitude of his words. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop herself. Marcus didn't hesitate. "I need you to stay close, Clara. I need you to watch over things while I handle this. It's getting dangerous, and I can't trust anyone else to handle it the way you can." Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to pull away, to refuse, but the look in Marcus's eyes stopped her. He was asking her to choose, his world, or a life she couldn't even begin to imagine without him. She didn't know if it was love or fear that kept her standing there, but she nodded. "I'll do it." The following weeks were a blur of planning and action. Clara's role had shifted dramatically. No longer just a secretary and assistant, she was now overseeing operations, making decisions, and getting deeper into Marcus's illegal dealings. She attended more meetings with the underworld figures Marcus worked with, and each encounter left her more conflicted than the last. But it wasn't just the business that was changing. Her relationship with Marcus was evolving too. She had never expected to be drawn to him in this way, but the longer she spent by his side, the more she saw the man beneath the hardened exterior. He had a tenderness that few ever saw, especially when it came to Sophia. He paid for her entire recovery, arranged the best specialists, and even set up a scholarship fund for her to finish her studies. Clara couldn't deny that Marcus had a sense of loyalty that matched her own, even if it was tangled up in a world of crime. Still, the fear didn't go away. With every passing day, Clara grew more afraid of what was to come. Marcus's plan to take down Ethan Grant had escalated quickly, and Clara found herself watching the streets of the city from the windows of their penthouse, as if waiting for the storm to break. One evening, while sitting at the edge of the dining table, Clara received an unexpected phone call. It was Sophia, her voice shaking with panic. "Clara, you need to come quickly. There are men outside the house. They're watching me." Clara's blood ran cold. She immediately reached for her jacket, her heart pounding in her chest. "Sophia, stay inside. Lock all the doors and windows. I'm on my way." She hung up the phone, adrenaline surging through her body. As she rushed to the door, Marcus appeared in the hallway. His face was grim. "What's happening?" he asked, his tone low and controlled. "It's Sophia," Clara said, her voice trembling. "She's being followed. I need to go now." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you." They rushed out together, Clara's mind racing. As they sped through the city, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had feared was about to come crashing down. The world Marcus had dragged her into was no longer just a dangerous business, it was a threat to everything she cared about. When they arrived at Sophia's apartment, Clara was relieved to find her safe inside. The men who had been following her were nowhere to be seen, but Clara knew this was just the beginning. Ethan Grant's men aren't just after Marcus anymore, Clara said, her voice filled with fear and realization. They're coming after everything we've built. Marcus's jaw clenched. And they'll regret it. That night, Clara stood by Marcus's side, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. She had made her decision, and now there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur of tension and uncertainty. Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being constantly watched. Ethan Grant's men had made their move, and now it was clear that Marcus's empire was under threat. The calm and composed facade Marcus had so carefully maintained was starting to crack, and Clara couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in his behavior. He was always calculating, always 10 steps ahead, but now there was an edge to him that was impossible to ignore. Clara had seen Marcus in action before, charming, strategic, unshakable, but now there was an intensity in his eyes that spoke of desperation. She had always thought Marcus was invincible, but in these moments, she realized that even he had vulnerabilities. Late one night, Marcus summoned Clara to his office, his voice sharp and urgent. "We need to move quickly," he said, looking up from the stack of documents on his desk. "Grant is making his move. He's trying to take over our territory, and if we don't act fast, we'll lose everything." Clara stood by the door, her nerves on edge. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety that gnawed at her. Marcus didn't look up immediately, his mind clearly focused on the strategy at hand. "I need you to go with Victor tomorrow. You'll be overseeing some of the negotiations. You're going to be in charge of making sure the deal goes through, and you need to be ruthless. We can't afford to show any weakness." Clara nodded, the gravity of Marcus's words settling heavily on her. She had never been involved in anything like this before. The power struggles, the constant threat of betrayal, it was all starting to feel like a nightmare. But at the same time, there was a part of her that was awakening, something she hadn't fully realized until now. She was becoming a part of this world, whether she liked it or not. The next day, she met with Victor, one of Marcus's most trusted men. He was tall, imposing, with a sharp look in his eyes that made Clara uneasy. "We've got a meeting with Grant's people later today," Victor said, his tone gruff. "And if we don't close this deal, Marcus is going to lose control of everything." Clara was still processing Marcus's orders, but she knew that this was her chance to prove herself. As much as she hated the thought of getting further entrenched in Marcus's world, she couldn't afford to back down now. "Let's get this over with," she said, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. The meeting with Grant's men took place in a private room at a luxury hotel, far from the prying eyes of the public. Clara could feel the tension in the air as she entered the room, her steps measured, confident. She had to act as though nothing fazed her. The men sitting at the table were not the kind of people she normally interacted with, cold, calculating, with an air of danger surrounding them. Ethan Grant wasn't there, but his presence loomed over the entire room. His men were there to discuss terms that could either make or break Marcus's empire. The negotiations were tense, and Clara could feel the heat of the situation rising as the back and forth continued. She kept her eyes on the men across the table, never letting her guard slip. Victor spoke first, his voice low and commanding. "We're here to make sure you understand that this deal is non-negotiable," he said, his gaze never leaving the man at the head of the table. "Marcus has made it clear that he won't back down." Clara listened carefully, watching the subtle shift in the atmosphere as the negotiations went on. She could see the men across from them becoming agitated, but they were trying to maintain control. That's when Clara made her move. "I think you're missing something," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Marcus is giving you an opportunity, one you won't get again. If you want to continue doing business in the city, you'll accept these terms. No more games." There was a moment of silence as the men exchanged looks. Clara felt the weight of the room pressing in on her, but she held her ground. This was no longer about just being an assistant. It was about surviving in a world where trust was a luxury and loyalty was bought with blood. The negotiations continued, but this time, Clara could sense the shift. She wasn't just Marcus's assistant anymore. She was part of the power play, a player in her own right. By the end of the meeting, they had secured the deal. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step toward survival. As they left the hotel, Victor gave Clara a look of approval. "You did well," he said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "Marcus will be pleased." Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. The deal was done, but at what cost? She had seen firsthand how easily the men in this world could turn on each other. It wasn't about right or wrong, it was about power. And once you had it, there was no going back. That night, as Clara lay in bed, her mind raced. She had just made her first real mark in Marcus's world. But it wasn't just the deal that weighed on her, it was the realization that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. There was no turning back now. The choices she made from here on out would shape the rest of her life. The days following the successful negotiation were some of the most tense of Clara's life. As much as she had proven herself capable in the business world, the weight of what she had become involved in continued to press heavily on her conscience. The line between loyalty and survival was beginning to blur, and Clara wasn't sure which side she was on anymore. Marcus was pleased with the outcome of the deal, but his approval came with its own set of expectations. He needed Clara more than ever now, as his trust in her had deepened. She was no longer just the assistant, she had become an integral part of his operation. It was clear that Marcus was grooming her for something bigger, but with each new responsibility, Clara felt herself slipping further into the shadows of his world. One afternoon, as Clara sat in Marcus's office, reviewing paperwork for a new project, he walked in, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something sharper. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low. Clara looked up, startled. What kind of problem? Marcus took a seat across from her, his eyes intense. "Ethan Grant. He's making moves again. This time, it's personal." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had heard about Grant's ruthless tactics before, but this felt different. Marcus had always been in control, but now, she could see the cracks in his empire. She knew that if they didn't act quickly, everything Marcus had built could come crashing down. "What do you need me to do?" Clara asked, the weight of her decision clear in her voice. She had already made her choice. There was no turning back. Marcus hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I need you to handle the public side of things. We can't afford any more scandals. You'll be in charge of the media response. You know how to handle the press, and right now, that's just as important as the business deals." Clara nodded. She understood. In the world Marcus inhabited, perception was everything. If the media turned against him, it could all unravel in an instant. But as she left his office, heading to the corporate headquarters to prepare the statements, Clara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something darker was coming. She had been so focused on the external pressures of their world that she hadn't stopped to consider the internal turmoil that was building up between Marcus and his enemies. Later that night, as Clara prepared for a media briefing, she was interrupted by a call from Sophia. Her sister's voice was frantic, her words tumbling over each other in a rush of panic. "Clara, they've been here. I don't know what to do, I'm scared. There were men outside again, this time they came right up to the door. I don't feel safe." Clara's heart sank. She had known that this day might come, but she had hoped that it wouldn't. She had tried so hard to protect Sophia, to shield her from the dangers of Marcus's world, but now, it seemed inevitable. "Sophia, stay inside. Lock every door and window. Don't go outside, no matter what." Clara's voice was steady, but inside, she was panicking. "I'm on my way," she added, already reaching for her coat. She couldn't risk her sister being caught in the crossfire of Marcus's battles. She couldn't let anyone else be hurt because of the choices she had made. When Clara arrived at Sophia's apartment, the sight of her sister pacing nervously in the living room only deepened her sense of dread. "You're okay, right?" Clara asked, walking toward her. Sophia nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm fine, but I don't know how much longer I can stay here. Clara, this is getting out of control." Clara hugged her tightly, trying to comfort her, but the reality of the situation was too much to ignore. The danger wasn't just coming from the shadows anymore. It was in their faces. It was in their homes. "I know," Clara whispered. "But I'm here now. We'll figure this out. I'll keep you safe, Sophia. I promise." As Clara stood there, holding her sister, she realized that she was on the brink of losing everything. Her life, her morals, and now, even her sister's safety were on the line. And for what? For the man she had come to care for, a man whose world was so far removed from anything she had ever known that she had lost sight of who she was in the process. The next day, Clara met with Marcus, her resolve steeled. She couldn't keep living in this constant state of fear and uncertainty. She had already sacrificed too much, and now, it was time for a decision that would change everything. "Marcus, I need to know what this is all for," Clara said, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I can't keep doing this. I'm losing myself in all of this, and I can't protect Sophia if this keeps going." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He stood there, looking at her with a mix of respect and something deeper, something like understanding. After a long pause, he spoke. "I'm not asking you to lose yourself, Clara," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm asking you to stand by me, to help me make this empire stronger. Together, we can take this to the next level. But you need to make a choice. You've been in this world long enough to know what's at stake." Clara stared at him, her mind racing. She had already made so many compromises, but could she really continue down this path? Could she continue to be a part of Marcus's world, knowing the cost would always be more than she could pay? Her eyes locked with Marcus's, and for a moment, she saw not the cold, calculating businessman, but a man who was also trapped by his own choices. "You're asking me to choose between you and everything I've ever believed in," Clara said softly. "And I don't know if I can do that anymore." Marcus stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Then it's time to decide, Clara. Because there's no going back." Clara felt her heart break as the weight of his words hit her. She had already given up so much, but now, the price was too high. She couldn't lose herself completely, not for Marcus, not for the money, and not for the power. The next morning, Clara packed her things and made the hardest decision of her life. She couldn't be a part of this world any longer. She couldn't let herself be consumed by it. When she left Marcus's penthouse, it was with a heavy heart, but a sense of clarity. She had to protect her sister herself, and the future she still had a chance to build. It was time to let go of the past and step into a new life. As she walked away, she could still hear Marcus's voice in her head, but this time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like the echo of someone who had been lost, just like her.